The sad part is, even I've noticed now that breathwork's a thing, people are like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, dude, you breathe every day. But it's utilizing the breath in different ways. You can't get it wrong. You have to play around intuitively with the breath in the moment to figure out what works for you.
What I love the most is actually lately I've been doing a lot of work with pregnant women and just getting them to understand that while we're breathing out the breath that we teach while you're pregnant creates such an amazing transformation for the baby that's within. And these babies that are born while using that breath, they are born with this agency, this real like spark and here I am and knowing and safety, born into safety. And it's such a huge thing.
And I wish that because of the chaos that happened after, because it was unpredictable, and when it got into the medical system, it kind of got into this situation I had no control of.
Well, this is fucking disappointing because my mum didn't breastfeed me because she thought that breasts were for sexual pleasure only, and that it was actually really shameful to breastfeed. And so I was starved of any nourishment.
That is the mother's job, and most of us have been unprotected emotionally and spiritually as well as physically because of those old parenting ways as well, that they should be sleeping through the night, and these expectations on such young little babies with no understanding that they're not regulating with anyone. So welcome to episode 6 of Spill the SpiritualiTEA, and I'm lucky enough to have my friend and breathworker as well, Nicola Laye, with us today. Now, let me just share a little bit about Nicola before I share about Nicola. Nicola is a mum to 2 beautiful girls, wife to a mind reader. Yes, really, nature lover, chai latte drinker. She is a renowned breathwork practitioner with over 24 years experience, specializing in aiding women through pregnancy, childbirth, into life as a mother. Her unique blend of personal experiences as a mother and entrepreneur, coupled with professional expertise, makes her a relatable and respectful authority in healing women, overcoming stress and anxiety, helping women.
Yes.
And you really do. And you are someone too that I feel that embodies all of that. And Nicola is someone for me that is a friend, but also someone that has been doing breathwork alongside me for as long as I have, for a very long time, and has been taught from a lineage of breathwork, as I have rebirthing, as she has through her line of breathwork. So it's really nice to have someone that is profoundly experienced and can hold a really deep space, but be a beautiful, authentic person, an amazing mama, and a good friend as well. So, and the same age.
Yes.
Around the same age. So it's kind of nice to be able to relate. So welcome, Nicola Laye, to my
thank you. So excited.
podcast, babes. But it's so nice to have you here. And it is really nice, I think, because our journey has been similar but different. And I think we're at the same age, and I think the same respect for what we do.
Yes.
How we have deep values for how we deliver breathwork, especially. Yes. Not that I want to definitely just stay on breathwork, but breathwork is such a passion for both of us into how it deepens the understanding of yourself, how it can really bring someone into the inner understanding of themselves and really change the way they relate to themselves and everyone around them.
Absolutely.
And I think the awareness to be embodied has to come with the breath through the body.
100%.
Yeah. And I don't think it is really recognized how powerful the breath is. And it doesn't have to be through force.
No.
The more subtle and in your body you do the breath, the deeper you go in clearing and healing within yourself. You can do breath and you can hyperventilate and you can go off into
wherever
holotropic.
You want to go.
Yeah, wherever you want to go. But I think the real healing of breath work is within the body, where it's changing the beliefs, and also the cells in your body are clearing and the DNA is clearing and those patterns are moving and the shifts happen deeply within the body. And that's uncomfortable, and that's where you need to be held as you breathe to move that energy through your body. And what I love is that you have the same way of working with the breath, which is very yin, very gentle, but it's so powerful.
It's so powerful. I feel like in the last 24 years, I've learnt so many different modalities of breath. And from clinical to now, the rebirthing work to the process work, that, you learn so much about how breath can, be altered and changed. And what I find fascinating now, as we both sit in this time of our life, is the amount of people that teach the breath with it only needs to be this way, and mouth breathing is so dangerous, and I remember something really interesting, which I think is quite funny, is Binny Dansby, who has been mentoring me now for a really long time. She's, one of the originals, 87, I think she is this year. She said, my darling, and she's from New York. My darling, she said, I went once to a breathwork facilitation in New York, and we were learning to breathe through our assholes. And I just sat there and I thought, well, that is just the best. Yeah. And she always says that if someone teaches you this is the only way, it means that they haven't opened their eyes to breath.
And it changes all the time. Use the breath for breath work, long journeys, in the sense to how I use the breath intimately for myself daily, then how I use the breath when I'm intimate, how I use the breath when I'm emotional, I do the breath to calm myself down. They're all subtly different.
Absolutely.
And it all comes back with what you need in that moment to regulate yourself, to stay within the body.
Absolutely. And understanding that it's like a little toolbox, but I don't even like calling that. But it's, what is working for you in the moment, isn't it? And, for the work that I've been doing with childbirth, and it's really interesting. I've just, there's so much to say on that, but you work with someone in the moment of their most rawness, vulnerability.
Oh my gosh.
The deepest part of your soul comes out to show when you're in your birth, right? And when you're in that moment with somebody, you've got to work with what you know, and you can see it, because they're not going to vocalize, I feel like this or I feel like this. You've just got to work with what comes up. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm so grateful that I have so much knowledge in this now, that I can, really utilize a breath in different ways in different moments.
Well, you're
with
intuitively
everybody.
listening.
Yeah, it's an intuitive experience. And some people that are so rigid with their breath practices, they're missing out on so many amazing...
Well, they're missing out on the expansive healing of the breath.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the openness that it creates. And that's what I feel is my whole mission in life, is to create, heart opening experiences, whether it's for 1 minute or it's a longevity of it being for hours. So, and if you can't access that, then, you're missing out.
Well, you're also then limiting what you're accessing.
Yes.
Because you are being rigid, and that has to be that way. There is no right way. And the sad part is, even I've noticed now that breath work's a thing, people are like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, dude, you breathe every day. But it's utilizing the breath in different ways. You can't get it wrong.
No.
You have to play around intuitively with the breath in the moment to figure out what works for you. So just because I can share something with you that opens and it works, and I can hold a space, and I can give you tools in the sense of techniques in different moments, you might find that the opposite breath works for you in that moment of challenge.
Absolutely.
Or that opposite breath works for you when you're in the midst of giving birth, So there is an intuition that once you have an awareness of your breath, how does that work in my body, and how can I play with it? How can I deepen that connection, when I'm feeling really anxious?
Yes.
How do I bring myself back to calm? Or if I'm feeling like my mind, what breath works for me to disrupt that sort of mind to come back to the body, so I'm not going down those loopholes, of round and round and round, Because if we're not coming back to the body and listening to what we need, or to how we feel to know what we need, that's an intuitive path of knowing what you feel to then relate to what you need to get to the understanding of that. Yeah. And if we're only using one way to get there all the time,
well, it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
It's that relationship that you have with your breath is the key to the door, isn't it? And I feel there's something I ask nearly everybody I've been working with this year, particularly because I've just gone and done so much deep in work. We have to also remember that as facilitators, we have to be able to keep evolving and keep working on ourselves. I think that's another whole topic. But I think what I realized the most was being with one of the originals and learning from her this year, living with her. So,
so powerful though.
Being able to understand how much you can get caught into everyday notion and, the way that you speak, what you're calling in. But she taught me some really beautiful things. And one of them was, the breath. What do you think?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about your breath? And people go into their logic and I'm like, no, what came up when you said that? And most people look at me and they'll come up with an emotion and I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
What do you think about your breath? And we'll ask that 10 times. And then they're like, what is this for? And I'm like, because how you feel about your breath is how you feel about your feelings. Yeah. And if you are walking around,
when we have a feeling.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to feel that. So I'm just going to, I'm just going to suck it up. I'm going to hold my breath. And I'm not going to breathe. And so I think it's really fascinating that for the first time, because you and I both the same, as I'm a deep thinker and a deep feeler. And I sense what I'm sensing and I feel what I'm feeling and I'm very expressive.
Yeah.
And not everyone's like that. So, but I also know how much I can get that can run away with me. And then, you sit with someone who is so closed down and it's such a...
Well, it's like Japanese and Chinese sometimes in that way that we've shut parts of ourselves down to protect ourselves, that it does become very logical. So to open that space to come back in the body where it feels really unsafe, it's all nervous system work.
Totally.
And to come from here to here, which I just was speaking previously to Luke about that, it was like, it's a big journey.
There's a really huge
But the breath
journey.
is something that can be such a great friend and change your whole physiology in the sense how you perceive everything, how you will relate to challenges in your life.
Absolutely.
Because as much as there's like this higher version in the sense that you can lovingly have, the breath will also help you work with that higher loving version of yourself to go, it calms the body as you're doing it. So there's this relationship you're building with the breath and the knowingness of yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
it's such a powerful place.
It is. And I think, it's interesting because you and I both come from a holistic perspective on everything. So for you, with all your yoga training and all the things that you've learned, and for me being a holistic practitioner for 25 years now, I've done the work with sitting and holding space without having to think about the breathing. And so I think, bringing all those modalities together, what we're teaching isn't just about the breath.
No.
And it's really, for me now, the breath is a vehicle that it moves us forward.
Yeah.
But it's the processing around, why am I thinking this? Yeah. Why am I doing this behavior?
And that's rebirthing is that I learned very early was belief systems, personal lie.
Totally.
Birth trauma,
That's
which is the first way our body reacts.
Yep.
Yeah. All these little blueprints that we've kind of created, that 0 to 6, that sort of inner child part of our life where we're perceiving everything, that all gets locked and stored in moments of time in our body, that when we get to access that stuck, trapped emotion that gets caught up and we hold it through ways of protection and coping in our bodies through the breath. And the only way we can really unlock it, yes, we can do different things, but the one thing we can access consistently is the breath.
Absolutely.
We don't need to go on a journey. We don't need to even have any involvement with anyone else, but we do need support.
Yes.
When it gets to the parts where we get to the resistance and we go back into old ways of what was safe, to sometimes expand into the new, but we need someone to lovingly guide us, hold that space that we feel safe.
Yes.
And I know for you and I, space holding means open heart and you're safe here.
Absolutely.
I can hold you through whatever reaction you have to yourself and the emotion that comes through with it. Nothing will waver me or my space in holding love for you.
Absolutely.
And I've had people vibrate across the floor. I've had people, get angry and hurt and wildly do very crazy and different things through their breath work. But if you bring them back to their body, because that can also be a projection, and keep bringing them in, back into love, back into their heart, back into the feeling, then all of a sudden it's that.
Safe again.
Which is then it's that co-regulation back into your own body, isn't it?
Yes. And it fascinates me. Every single moment I get to breathe with someone is always a learning experience. And I just love that. Each layer of yourself, there's always someone arriving to show you something in yourself as well. And I know that you and I both don't teach from an egoic perspective. And that's a rare thing now, I feel.
Because the breath, like you said, has become a modality that's just taught.
Yes.
It's not holding the space. It's not creating safety. It's not having the deep understanding of our own selves that, because we've gone to the depths of our own self and have spent a lot of time in relationship to ourselves and others holding space, there is that non-wavering energy of there's no reaction here. I've got you. Be whoever you need to be.
Yes.
Everything is welcome. That's very rare because a lot of people like to contain the container in the sense of where they have the ability to hold emotional space.
Very special.
100%. But that's where the transformation is in that. And the breath as a modality to teach is really powerful. And I think people don't recognize how powerful it is. And like we've talked about, it is scary in the sense of people going out there with not a lot of depth to their own understanding of themselves emotionally that are holding space for others.
Yes. That's quite interesting actually, because I have probably 4 to 5 people a week that will ask me where I did my training, how quick did I do it, and how much did it cost? And I've kind of got a little bit more over it as this year's come through. And so now I'll just call it and say, why are you wanting to do this work?
Yeah.
Not answering what they were wanting me to.
Yeah.
And then they're, I went to this breath work and I'm like, how much work have you done and how much breathing have you done?
Yeah.
Oh, I went to this one workshop. Okay. What do you do for work? What's your life experience? And then I say to them, go off, do lots of breath, and come back in a year and ask me the same question.
And I mean, even going back, like I'm sure Binny and Sondra and Leonard, who my lineage is with the breath, the way that they do, like you have to at least do 10, 20, 30
at least,
like one-on-ones.
Yes. And
then also integration work, and then you would work alongside them. Yeah. You didn't just go out and go, hey, I really love this, made me feel good, so I'm going to do a weekend course and then hold up a lot of people that are going through the same thing that I'm going, but I can't hold them because I'm exactly where they're at.
Yes.
And I know that everyone learns from each other, but there has to be a respect.
Well, an understanding of the power that you have.
100%.
And the ability to hold that without any ego or any toxic patterning of your own. You have to be able to know yourself, right?
Yeah, because otherwise you're reacting to your clients in a certain way and not being able to hold the space. Your mind or personality or emotionality that hasn't been processed gets involved in
completely
the circle.
Yeah.
And it's not a clear space for everyone else to be processing, and that just be held with no reaction, no judgment, just to be seen and loved in that.
Yeah.
And that's a practice in itself. Without the whatever modality that you're doing, to be able to witness someone with love and not judgment. But I'm the same as you, like when it comes to breath work, like I've had some of my clients go to other breath workers. I'm not saying I'm the only person.
No.
But not knowing how the person is going to react or having awareness of what they're actually coming in, their energy when they walk in, noticing if they're not integrated when they walk out, recognizing how they're being. You know, one of my clients walked out with amnesia at the time. She'd gone through huge amounts of stress. She was in a heightened state and she thought, great, I'll just go to this breath work. It's simple. But she went into a place that wasn't recognized by the facilitator and left, and she didn't know where she was. She forgot that she'd broken up with the husband, all this stuff. So she forgot. And that's the power of breath that you don't necessarily know. It's not always going to happen, but when you've got some deep trauma,
you have to be able to come back into your body before you leave the building.
You need to be grounded. You need to make sure that you've been checked in with, that that person knows your emotional state, and that there's that access to them also after, if you are feeling a certain way.
Completely.
Because there's so much that comes up. And I just think there's a lot of people that, in a sense, don't recognize how powerful this is. So start somewhere. And if you don't feel safe, don't just allow yourself to open up in places that you don't feel. Trust that intuition. If I don't feel completely safe, don't hand over my power to someone else that is facilitating just because they're the facilitator. Trust your own gut. Trust your own intuition of what feels safe. Safe is different to knowledge. Safe is different to saying you should do something. If it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. And yes, there's resistance in that. But if you're lovingly being guided, you'll push those edges anyway.
Yes.
And you'll feel safe to go in there. But if it's through force and in a way that doesn't feel in tune, I feel like sometimes it re-traumatizes a person.
Oh, and that's what people are teaching now is trauma experience release, but they're not trauma informed. And then so I always say to someone, when you walk in a room and you notice how many people are in there and how many facilitators are in that room, then you know whether you're safe or not. Yeah. To a point.
Yeah.
And then if there's only 2 or 3 and you've got 200 people in a room, you need to take the exit.
Yeah, that freaks me out.
That's happening all the time.
Yeah.
Well, you and I have small, intimate circles.
I mean, for me, 2025 in a workshop is my max.
Totally.
And I know I can hold that space. I won't go over that.
I've come right down now, so I probably
I do. Like doing it too.
I love 10. 10's my magic number.
15's so nice.
15's a squeezy, but you know, and you know, like we run them very similarly, and it's, I don't know, I'm not there. I obviously we've all got to make an exchange of abundance for ourselves, but it's not like throw them all in a big room and let's just get them down on the ground and breathe them and earn like thousands of dollars.
Well, because a lot of the time you're just really experiencing everybody else's energy and everyone's on everyone else's mat, and there's this whole trauma bonding that everyone's experiencing, that then there's releases, but there's no integration, there's no safety, and people are just walking out kind of left.
Yeah.
Left to go, oh, now I'm really confused and I'm in a reactive state. My nervous system is overwhelmed. I've opened myself up. And most of the time they're just shut down in ways that they've learned to cope, or they're just re-traumatized. And then they feel less than because they've had this a sort of moment of going, oh, I get it. But then they go back and withdraw and repeat the same thing again. So the integration work is so important.
Really important.
I think that's really the key. Breathwork is just the tool to keep opening.
That's right. It's just the vehicle.
It's just the vehicle. It's not the only thing. And the way you breathe, like we said before, it's not one way. So you can't get it wrong. And that's one thing I really want people to, you can't get the breath wrong.
No.
If it feels good to you in that moment and it's working for you to calm you down, or it's working for you to disrupt the pattern, or it's working for you to get deeper, then that's it.
Yeah. And it's ultimately, like we come back to, for me and you, it's all about creating safety so that person can go to where they want to go and where they need to go.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something once you have regulated with someone, that then you can do it by yourself easily because you feel regulated. And you're like, oh, that's what I feel like when I'm not feeling safe, or I'm not showing up for myself, or, you know, I'm sort of out of my own alignment. And then I need to bring myself back, or my mind's going, I say, okay, you have those reference points and you can go, okay, cool. I remember that when I was and I'm safe to go there.
Yes. I'm safe to go there.
I'm safe to go there. And And that's what I think, working with someone that can hold the space, that you start to build this expansion in your metabolism of emotions. Your nervous system expands, and then you're like, oh, I can regulate here now.
Yeah.
So then you're moving and shifting the patterns instead of staying in just one version of what your nervous system is wired to. That's the greatest thing. We can rewire ourselves.
Completely. It fascinates me.
So cool. It's so cool.
I love that. And what I love the most is actually lately I've been doing a lot of work with pregnant women and just getting them to understand that while we're breathing out the breath that we teach while you're pregnant creates such an amazing transformation for the baby that's within. And these babies that are born while using that breath, they are born with this agency, this real like spark and here I am and knowing and safety, born into safety.
That's
and
massive.
It's such a huge thing. But you know, the thing that really is something that I've been really wanting to work on for a long time are the women that want to have a baby, and then they'll call me and they'll say, I just want to get through the birth.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I might not be the right person for you.
No, because before and after, holy crap.
But
burgers.
we're like, what
Yeah.
what baton are you going to pass on to your baby?
Yeah.
Have you done the work to understand all of these things that you've lived, your past experience, your mother's experience, your grandmother's experience? Where are you
Aren't
at?
Your kid's the greatest teacher.
I know, right? So, and they're looking at me like, oh, I don't understand. What do you mean? And I'm like, well, you know, so yeah, it's all the unfolding of the work through the breath and through process and deepening work and discussion that they then start to, the penny drops. Okay. So, you know, it's the same thing when you fear something in life and you keep repeating that pattern until you get someone to hold that space for you. If you walk into birth with that huge pattern, it just rolls itself up in that birth experience.
Oh, 100%.
And it's the time it does, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know the time is moving in towards end of life. It's exactly the same. I've worked with
Birth
both
and death.
processes. Yeah, they're very similar energies.
Yeah, very similar energy.
It's a real wild experience to be a facilitator in either of those, to watch the similarity in
to experience and be a facilitator,
Yeah.
like both, like in the
Yeah.
sense of like to witness it and to hold it.
Yeah.
It has a very much a similar kind of feeling of chaos, but then also peace and connection. There's this surrender into the chaos of what you're experiencing and a letting go.
Yeah.
Because you have to let go when you die, and you have to let go when you're birthing.
Yes.
Because otherwise, if you're holding on,
Yeah. The
you know,
control.
it's funny with my first birth, that was one thing I was doing. Even though I was so prepared and I was doing it at home, the letting go part, I was projecting more than I was letting go, my body go. I was kind of pushing it out. And so then, I mean, I still had a natural birth, but it would have probably been easier if I had recognized and had more intuition of where my body was and how to breathe through it.
Yeah.
In the challenge of I was projecting more of it than I was internally going in with it. So by the time I had Tyler, I was like, I'm on. I was so in tune with my body. I recognized, because I'd experienced it. And this is the same as growth, isn't it? Once you've experienced that surrender and you know you can do it, then you're on. Well, little did I know, little man had turned and I had him breach at home. So that was completely different. And if I probably had him, it wasn't breech, he would have come early, but it was 4 hours at home in the pool. But that also knowingness that I knew what I was doing. And even when I found out he was breech, I remember Andila going, stand up, because breech, obviously the legs pop out and your body goes, right, I've had the baby. Well, he was not sliding. He was hanging legs down into the water and his head was in there.
So much.
And so I got a picture of me like holding I still didn't get that he'd come out the wrong way though, because I was still so focused on what was going on, and everyone was sort of like, holy crap, you're like,
We have a breach.
we have a breach here. And but yeah, but there was something innately, and she said, you need to have another contraction. Obviously my body had kind of felt like it was done, so it was pretty much going through the placenta. But then it was like I literally had to create that in my body. And so she said, I stood up and then I bared down, I squatted down, and then she said, and then and there was such a knowing.
Yeah.
a wisdom that came from my body at that time, and this creation of that last push for his head, and he did not have a small head. So like whichever way it came out, it was going to, you know, but he unfortunately breached. There was, you know, at home, it didn't really go how I planned, but the birth was amazing. And I wish that because of the chaos that happened after, because it was unpredictable, and when it got into the medical system, it kind of got into this situation I had no control of.
Oh, it's hard.
But I had to have a lot of compassion for myself after that. And I think birthing is, because we have these expectations of what we're going to experience in birth. And I was very prepared. And that's why I love what you're doing, because I'm someone that once I make my mind up, before it happens, I need to prepare myself for it. So then when I'm in it, because I knew what it was already going to be after, because I recognized at a young age that I didn't want my kids to take on the unconscious stuff that I hadn't processed.
Absolutely.
So that was always a very big thing. I think that's why I found rebirthing. I was always looking for something at a young age, because I knew deeply that I need to understand myself beyond what I'd been taught.
Yes.
And what I'd taken on being a sensitive little person in my family. So it was like, so when I talk about, I love what you're doing, because that pre-birth and the understanding of yourself, when you go into that challenge of birthing, you are initiating yourself into something completely different, motherhood.
Yes.
From that maiden to mother.
Yes.
You know.
That big rite of passage.
Jeez. And like, but there's also when it doesn't go how you planned it, no matter how you plan it consciously.
Yeah.
They've got their own pathway here.
They've got their
also.
own journey. They're already doing their own journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that, like we've just talked about, you know, that birth patterning, which comes up for both of the way we've been taught, that birth trauma, it is a trauma. Birthing is a trauma.
It is.
For the baby to come here and the mother to birth, it's, you know, that also creates belief systems.
All by itself. So,
Yeah.
for example, you know, I'm just trying to think of there's so many, there's just too many, to be honest. But there was one with this particular lady that I'd been working with for about 3 years, and she fell pregnant while she was, you know, on the program with me and doing the work. But we talked a lot about her relationship with her mother, and she said, I just don't know why I get so angry with my mom, and she really annoys me. And yet she's the most beautiful person, and I'm really over feeling this resentment towards my mum. And I said to her, let's investigate your birth. She goes, what, of my other children? I'm like, no, the birth of you.
Yeah.
And she said to me, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. And I said, well, it's huge. Let's just go through it. So after doing some really deep questioning and, you know, really sitting into some breathing and thought processes, it transpired that she was taken from her mum straight after the birth and put into NICU. And mum wasn't able to hold her for 3 or 4 days. So she was in an incubator for a really long time, tube fed, and in her breath work after that, she saw herself there looking through the window saying, I'm not enough. Everyone's
left me.
No one's here for me. I'm all by myself. I've got to do life all by myself. And as soon as she got that vision and she realized, she was like, oh my God, my poor mum. And it was just magical, just watching this reconnection of her and her mum. And she'd had 2 traumatic births already with her own children. And I said, oh, you know, sometimes we recreate the same pattern in the same birth process of our own children. And she's like, I don't want to do this for the next one. And I'm like, well, we need to do some work. So she spent a lot of time, to the point where her mom actually contacted me and said, you have no idea, I've been waiting 33 years to my daughter to accept me. And
Wow.
Wow.
How, like hard. I mean, that, and it's funny when you were saying that, because I was just going through both of my births. My birth trauma was, if I'm fully alive, I'm going to die.
Yes.
Both mum and I nearly died. She had preeclampsia, and they gave her medication and blood pressure went right down, her heart stopped. So they had to get me out in an emergency Caesar. So mum was completely knocked out.
Not able to receive you.
Not able to receive me. I was just ripped out, left on the bed, because then they were having to tend to mum because she was dying, literally.
Yeah.
So then she didn't hold me because she was unconscious for a fair amount of time, and I was left same in the NICU as well. But because it was, everyone sort of pulled me out in this diet, everyone's dying, because I think I got affected as well. My heart rate
would have done. Yeah.
So there was this fully thing of like, when obviously I'm alive, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So all these health things that I created through my life where
Makes so much sense.
kept me half alive.
Yeah.
And I would push myself to this place where my health would be affected, so then I couldn't fully be alive and do what I was here to do. I was half living.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And then when you said that, then it was funny because my mum wasn't at my first birth out of circumstance. She was at the second one. And Tyler nearly died. So when he was born, even though he came out, he wasn't breathing properly. And I gave him mouth to mouth when he was still attached to me.
That's right. I remember you saying that to me.
So in a sense, he nearly died because he wasn't breathing properly. But that was the shock, I think, of coming out breech and not having that first breath.
Yeah, the first breath.
And noticing that his birth trauma is very similar to mine. And I worked through his with him.
Yeah, I love that.
And we talk about it a lot. We talk about his birth because then he got taken up to, they were testing babies at the time. We don't know if they were fully not breathing. He was still attached to me. He never went blue. But I think because I had a home birth and the whole situation, there was a lot of judgment around what I had chosen to do, and I was a bad parent and for doing it at home and having this situation. I had a great midwife. I had an awesome doula. I was very prepared. But when it straight got into the medical, it was like, well, we're doing this and maybe. So he was put on a bed of ice for 3 days. He was fed morphine and sugar. So I was birthing the placenta. He got taken to the hospital, and before I got to the hospital, where they would normally just warm the baby and just make sure he was close and just monitor their brainwaves, well, they were testing babies at this stage to see what if we cooled them down and we could monitor their brainwave to see if there's any effect in the brain from the lack of. So from someone that wanted this holistic home birth to then going, holy shit, this is my worst nightmare. I couldn't breastfeed him for 3 days because he wasn't allowed to be fed. I couldn't hold him. I had to sit behind.
Did you hear that? Like he wasn't allowed.
No, and he had to lay on a bed of ice in a little nappy and had all these things attached to him. And he was cooled at a certain temperature that his brain, so everything in his body slowed down and his brain was getting monitored. And if I had been at the hospital, it would have been a very different situation. But because he got taken before me, and my husband just went, at the time, was just like, okay, well, he was in overwhelm.
And also went into full,
what do I do? And so when I got there, everything was underway with no consent. So there was a lot that for him, he got left alone. He was abandoned. Separated from me for 3 days. So he was so clingy. He gets overwhelmed and sensitive. And so I've done a lot of clearing and work with him.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. So, but in my knowledge of my birth trauma, I can recognize it in him.
Absolutely. Where is my mum? No one's here for me.
Yeah, like we'd be walking in and if he couldn't see me in the shop sometimes, he'd freak out.
Yeah.
And instead of me going, oh, for God's sakes, what's wrong with you? Like I'm around I would understand how powerful that was for him in not being able to see me in that moment.
Because it just continues on through life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And, I recognize it in myself. My dad wasn't present at my birth at all. He was away. My mom was in a country that she didn't have any friends. She was really lonely. She was really young. And she hasn't told me half of what happened at the birth because, she's trying to be that mother of everything was perfect. Don't worry, my love. And I'm like, I know there's something there. And so what I notice is for me through being birthed from her is that a disappointment.
Yeah.
I must have arrived at the world going, well, this is fucking disappointing because my mum didn't breastfeed me because she thought that breasts were for sexual pleasure only.
Wow.
And that it was actually really shameful to breastfeed. And so I was starved of any nourishment. And then, when you even depict that, and it's not for anyone that's listening to feel like I didn't feed my child, so there's something wrong with me.
No.
There's no judgment. But what I noticed from doing more deepening with that is that I have
an issue with receiving abundance because I wasn't given the abundance when I was born of nourishment. So therefore my life journey is I struggle to receive, but I'm freaking good at giving.
Yeah.
So I have to make sure all the time that, you know, you can't give and not receive, Nick. That's not the flow.
Yeah.
But it plays out in money. It plays out in
Everywhere.
so
Energy,
many
isn't it?
parts. Yeah. So it's been a real revelation just unpicking my birth and asking her set questions and noticing that I'm very detached from my parents. I never felt like I belonged to them because they didn't really want to pick it up.
Yeah.
They didn't want to pick up the role. Mum's like, oh, yes, she sleeps really well. She can just stay there and I'm not going to pick her up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That attachment part is
That's
so
right.
important between that 0 to 6 and
Totally.
feeling safe because you're in the mother's energy.
That's
That is the
right.
mother's job. And most of us have been unprotected emotionally and spiritually as well as physically.
Yeah.
Because of those old parenting ways as well, that they should be sleeping through the night, and these expectations on such young little babies with no understanding that they're not regulating with anyone.
That's right.
Right.
It's a wild ride. And I think for me also, when I, you know, having done so much work on myself, and I was teaching pregnancy work when I fell pregnant with my first Taylor
That's why you've
Fern.
done it.
And I was just kind of like, I'm just going to rock this birth.
Yeah.
Like I was doing the hypnobirthing, I was doing all the breathing, I was doing all the movement. And I did have hyperemesis, which at the time when I spoke to my mentor, she said, you've got deep fear. And this is a different mentor at the time. You've got deep fear. That's what hyperemesis is. And I'm like, don't be silly.
I've done so much work on
what,
myself.
20, 30 times a day I'm throwing
Yeah.
up. This is something fundamentally wrong with me. But what I realize now is it's very true. So, you know, I didn't think that I was fearing. I was really excited to be a mum.
Fear is such a tricky little...
38 years old, thinking I've done a life journey already. I'm ready to settle down. I'm not interested in going out clubbing and doing all the things in
So
a great
prepared.
relationship. I'm so there. This is going to be easy. And then when we were like 42 weeks and there wasn't a sign of her coming. And that's when it all started to kick in.
Yeah.
Just am I going to be able to do this? I could see
The challenge part of it, yeah.
And I could see Anthony impatience, like, why have you not produced this baby yet? I've got to go away. I've got to work. You know, there was a lot of timelining and then the coercion coming from the hospital, like you have to be here. And at the time, hypnobirthing wasn't a real thing at hospital. So I was kind of like, I got my thing. I had to know that I had to, like, Anthony, you're going to have to like really back me up here because they're going to want to do intervention. They're going to want to come in. And then, you know, the words.
Such a deep trust.
It is.
Such a deep trust you have to have. I think it's so much more accepted now.
Yes.
But even then, for me, I was the same, like making the choices when I had the boys and the things that I did and how I did them. And it was always, I got a lot of judgment.
There's so much, but there still is, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's like right or wrong. And,
You're one of those.
Yeah, one of those.
Oh, one of those. Oh, God, she's one of those.
Yeah, and to me, it was like I had to do what was right where I felt the safest. And because it didn't have the perfect, I ended up transferring. I was always open to transfer to the hospital. There was never, but I didn't feel as safe there. And for me to do it, it felt innately right to do it. And I know it was probably right for both my boys because they had a plan regardless.
Yeah.
But everything that I did with my midwife too before it, my before work and after, the aftercare that she gave me and everything that I helped integrate, the stuff that I still have done, it's the same work that I've done on myself. And it's funny that you said, you know, a while ago when I was having... I was thinking, why aren't I receiving money? Same thing. Money's been a big thing for me too. We're not dissimilar, babes. It was like, and my mum, it was like, I was sitting here going, what is this feeling? I can have no money in my bank.
Yes.
But if I don't have the food that I need in my fridge, like, I don't mean just any food. I mean the things
Good
that
food.
nourish me, like my cacao, all my things that I feel really
nutrients.
nourished by, that make me happy.
Yes, same.
When my fridge gets a little bit empty and it feels like I can't afford the things that I love that make me feel good, there's this anxiety. I can have nothing, no like literal money, but if there's no nourishment that I feel that I can't buy it, there's this survival anxiety.
Yes.
And I laid within myself and I was like, what is this feeling? Because it's triggering me so deeply. And I'm like, what's the feeling? I said, I feel like I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And then when I led back to it, and I was like, well, who feels like they're going to die? Because you're not going to die. You're safe.
Yes.
I'm fine. So what is it? And then when I let it back to my little baby self. And then I remember Mum saying to me, you were so demanding. You always wanted to feed. You wanted to feed every 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, you were really calling it in. Yeah.
So I was a really little baby too. I was a little bit early. I was only 5'5", so it's like tiny. But I don't think, because my mum went through such a trauma in her birth, and this is why I relate, because my sister had the same experience with her daughter Grace, that her body wasn't producing enough milk because she'd lost so much blood and she'd gone through all this trauma.
So much trauma.
That she didn't recognise it. No one told her. So she's sitting there trying to feed this baby that's obviously not getting fed constantly. And it got to the point she said, I don't know what to do with it. She keeps crying. So she just would leave me on the bed by myself. So I was hungry alone.
Oh,
because my mum couldn't cope. She was like, what do I do? Like, she said I was sitting on the side of the bed crying. My boobs were sore.
Yeah.
She had no support. She was
really lonely, all by herself.
Yeah, trying to deal with this teeny tiny little baby screaming. But that for me was like, I'm going to die. I'm hungry. And there's no one here.
I wonder what your mum's birth was like. You know, it keeps going, doesn't it? And I think for me, what I noticed...
it never got talked about.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I noticed the abandonment that came up for me when I was going in towards the birth of both of the girls, to the point where on my... And bearing in mind, like, Taylor Fern came out, calmest baby in the whole world. And on paper, that was a really traumatized birth.
Wow, yeah.
Because the induction was like a shit show. And... like, yeah, I never wish that on any person I ever work with. And I think I look at her and she's got agency, Taylor Fern, as you know. She just wide-eyed, here I am, let's go, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that really, for my own credit, I did so much work on myself that she was so calm. But I realised what a shit show that was going in. And Anthony literally abandoned me in the birth, just sat in the corner going, I don't know, I'm just going to eat sweets. You know, because he didn't know what to do, and he's a conformist naturally. And then when I went in towards Nella Rose's birth, he wasn't there at all. Like, he was away, and I started to go into labour, and I had influenza A, and so I abandoned myself while I was having her, because the fear of birthing her was so immense, because I hadn't cleared the first birth.
And you hadn't then the depth of your own abandonment stuff.
That's right. Well, it was all...
everything around you was like, I'm alone.
And I'd also lost a baby in between. And Anthony was just so in grief of that still, that he couldn't even embrace little Nella Rose. So she arrived in the world with her own lesson of, I've got massive heart issues and I'm a really sick baby.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have to pick it up.
Yeah.
So she cried for 6 months nonstop.
Yeah.
And I remember just looking at her going, how did I get this?
Yeah.
Anthony looked at me one day and he said, do we pick up the right kid from hospital?
Well, my ex was exactly the same with both my boys. They both were really sensitive babies.
Yes.
They had nose issues. They like noses in when you nose, then feeding was always, and my milk came fast. So then there was that. Then they had colic. So then that 5 to 7, that was Glenn was like, this is not fun. And it was not fun for me either. But he really struggled with the emotional having to give, whereas I was depleted and giving still.
Same.
So I had to pick up the whole thing, which then I think as a mother, you can tend to fall into that masculine part of
completely
driving this way of nurturing your child because you're so exhausted.
And I think you know what I learnt the most, and actually now that we're both in that midlife, is that, you know, because I had her at 41, and it was interesting, a hormone doctor I spoke to recently said to me, Nicola, you had her so late. Most people biologically shouldn't be having babies at 41, not really, because you're meant to have a rest time in your hormones before you then kick into perimenopause.
Oh, that's
in
interesting.
an ideal way. She said you're meant to have that quietness in your body. So
well, you're probably meant to have your kids out of the house by the time you turn. Well, by the time you get here, you're probably not supposed to. And that's an interesting conversation in itself.
Well, that's right.
Having kids and being perimenopausal and menopausal.
It's a wild ride. So what I've noticed now is that everything, and bearing in mind, like you and I both do deep work on ourselves, I'm continually going, like, picking up my thoughts, you know, really thinking into, like, what do I need to do for myself? Like, how do I need to choose
Come back
myself?
into the body. How am I feeling?
Yeah,
What's going
that's
on?
right.
Yeah,
so there's never a
constant-
stopping. And I've done so much work this year because I could feel it coming back as I'm entering this next part. All the stuff that I didn't quite manage to heal after the birth of the girls is sliding back in again.
Well, because you're deeply going into everyone else's pregnancies now, and you're mentoring in such a powerful way. You have a deeper awareness of yourself that you didn't have back then, that you can love that in such a different way.
Yeah.
And there was so much more wisdom in that gentleness you can have on how you navigated that time.
Totally.
Because
and so now
it's never perfect.
And now it's the time to like really face it head on.
Yeah.
Like, here it is, you know, don't abandon this, Nick. Like, you can't just walk away.
Well,
and
isn't that the amazing part? It's like going from, you know, maiden to mother. That's the initiation. Now we're going from mother to crone. But we're kind of doing crone and mother at the same time.
And it's not meant to come together.
And it's not. But obviously the modern woman now has challenged herself is, how do I navigate normally we're raising teenagers in a sense, and perimenopausal. So you've got teenage hormones and menopausal hormones. So, you know, really understanding your body, because what I've noticed in my nervous system being perimenopausal is that you don't have the control over your body. It's because there's obviously these markers every time that your body has to realign to, or you have to find alignment in every time your hormones change. So that's the interesting part. So you react to it the same way, and it triggers emotions in reaction to how you're feeling in your body. Has nothing to do with really anything's going on, but you just can't do things the same way.
No, you are not the same person. You are morphing into the next stage of who you're going to be. And
there's such an allowance, in that. But if you don't know how to regulate your nervous system and you don't have to recognize that that's just what's going on, how can I just hold myself in this?
Yeah.
If you go in reaction to it, well, you can blow shit up. Like,
you really can.
Yeah.
And even, you know, I was having to like unplug myself this morning and thinking, and, you know, Taylor Fern's, you know, bless her, she's so wise, you know, our kids are, because they've been living amongst us for such a long time. She's like, Mum, you know, I noticed that I probably triggered you this morning. And then, you know, I'm probably going to think about that today. And I'm like, love, I'm just having an untethered day. It's okay. You don't need to pick it up. It's just you're having an untethered morning and I'm having an untethered morning too.
But isn't that a beautiful reality that we don't have to be perfect? They don't have to be perfect.
No.
And some moments we're not going to deal with it. We are going to be in reaction. But it's the repair in the sense of how we go, it's okay. This is all welcome. It's a bit chaotic, but we can navigate it in love together.
That's right.
We didn't have that. It was just complete disconnection if it wasn't, you know.
And I don't know if you're noticing this, but what I'm also noticing is a very familiarity to pregnancy. And because I'm working in it, I can notice this, the judgments and the, oh, are you doing this? Oh, well, I haven't gone through any perimenopause problems. And I'm like, bullshit. I just think, honestly, it's okay to say you're not okay. And it's okay to say that you're going through all these body changes. Try, you know.
Because you have a different, there is a darkness to, maybe it's the death-like part of this rebirth into the crone part of you, but you don't feel great in your body.
No, you don't.
You don't feel attractive. And there's this kind of hiding, like a bit of a hermit part that I've noticed in a deeper way of, maybe it feels shameful that my body's not the way it was. I don't feel as attractive as I did. So there's this kind of like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Why am I feeling? But then I was like, but this is okay.
Yes.
You're okay to feel like this. You're going through so many changes. And if you can't lovingly just go, hey, babe. And I think because I've had health stuff through my life, I understand it. And there is a bit of a death to this version of me and this idea that I have to be perfect to be loved, being single too, not being in a partnership too. So dealing with a very different part of moving through menopause and life, and then not having any backup, parenting and doing this, and business. I don't want to be Superwoman, but I also want to adjust it that I can find alignment for myself, and it's not going to look the same.
No, it's totally not.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I think because I'm okay with it, it's because I didn't hide from anything before.
No, and
You can't take your little girl shit into crone years. You can't
you
take
can't.
your maiden stuff, your motherhood stuff into crone.
No, and it will keep waking you up until you do the work on it. And it's really interesting how I'm like, gosh, I really thought I'd nailed that one, and it's back up again. And it's like, okay, well, I can work and sit into that. So, you know, what I'm doing at the moment, and I'm trying to help other people that I'm working with, and you be doing this because this is what you're going into now with your own clients, is lean in.
Yep.
Don't avoid, don't run away from it, just lean right in. And I'm loving that feeling of, you know, Anthony looking at me, my husband, saying, you're a little bit crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really leaning into that, and you need to lean in with me. Otherwise we might not make it, actually. Just telling you, this is a really big transition. This is bigger than pregnancy.
Yeah.
This is
because there
big.
is such a, and I think probably that's where Glenn and I really moved in two different ways, was after the birth of both the boys. And I was like, I don't want my boys to see this as a relationship. And even though he's awesome and we're great friends, I couldn't keep growing, and I didn't want them to be stuck, because I was going to be stuck if I stayed in that relationship.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have the ability to evolve. Not that he wasn't a great person, not that just
not ready.
Not ready. But you know how proud I am of what we've co-parented. And funny enough, it's like I've held this space, and in the beauty of where we're at, even though now I'm going through menopause, he's all of a sudden stepped up. And the boys are more relatable to him. So all of a sudden I can let go a little bit of the boys. And I'm so happy to do that because there's space for me now. I've done the hard, like really, you know, birth 0 to 14 and 12. But I feel like I can let them go a little bit, because now I really feel like he's got it.
Completely. And isn't it the other thing that I'm noticing as well with working with clients that have got, you know, this idealism that you have your baby and then your parents are going to look after them with you.
Oh, see, I don't have any of that.
So,
never.
well, we
You
don't.
either.
No, but what I'm noticing, and I'm picking it up and actually reflecting it back, is your mother had you. She brought you up. You've now got your child. Yes, she's probably happy to help, but she's not going to take over and do it all again. She wants to slow down. And they're like, but that's not fair. And I'm like, well, you don't have babies to have your parents then help you reparent again. That's not how it works.
I mean, it's beautiful to have the support, but I think what everyone wants to keep living their life the way that they did as a maiden.
Yes.
Not to really transition in who are we and how we're creating this family as a mother. And that's something I will always honor in my ex-husband, that I was allowed to, he knew how important it was. And really, I lost all desire to work. I was like, from being such a, you know, over probably work, I had Zane. I went, all I want to do is love you. All I want to do is be your mum. All I want to do is focus on you. By the time Tyler came along, I was ready to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think when you're doing 2, it never stops anyway. So you might as well be doing something else, you know. I probably could have just, but I also have put them as my priority against everything and navigated around. And Glenn has always supported me in supporting them, even though I've probably been the parent, he's been the co. But now I feel like he's coming in to co-parent with me now.
So special.
Which is a testament to us being friends for such a long time and navigating, because what's been 9 years now, you know. And it just, in this stage where, of course, now my business is changing, I'm changing,
I can
the
see
wisdom
that.
that's coming through, it's,
Yeah, same for me too.
you'd feel it.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah.
So I don't, and that's why I love this perimenopausal or menopausal space. It's been, well, I don't think we had access to any knowledge, because no
there
one
hasn't
talked
been
about
any.
it.
There hasn't been any.
So we need to have conversations where we're not hiding away by ourselves. But I do think this work is in the internal, like mind to heart, to clearing out the, you know, your birth trauma, your belief systems, inner child stuff. This is all going to impact on you in this menopausal stage of life. If you don't have a new foundation for yourself as you move into this stage, it is going to be a rough fucking ride. And I'm actually, it's uncomfortable.
It is really uncomfortable.
But it's not rough.
But it's powerful.
I feel uncomfortably
powerful.
Does that make it's
completely.
like, I have no idea what the fuck's going on.
I keep saying
what this is all doing.
I'm like a bit messy, but I feel really wise and powerful.
Yes. Isn't it? But it's that, I suppose, truly is stepping into what femininity is.
Yes.
But feeling, it's like, I'm not sure what's going to happen today, but we've just got to, it's like kind of, where are we going with this, you know?
And I feel like there's a sense of, a little sense of joy and fun, like really on the horizon, that I really am able to access now more in, you know, with authenticity, rather than going, I'll just do that because, you know, and I'm not playing through my kids like I would have done when you're a mother. You kind of find your joy through your children.
Yeah.
And there'll be moments away from that. But now I can sort of feel that I don't care what anyone thinks of me anymore. I truly don't care at all.
No, it's not no fucks given.
Yes, so good. And I truly believe that, you know, I don't know, I've just got this new respect for older people now, more than I ever did before, and I've always had that respect.
I think that we never got taught, even though we got taught to respect elders, but in a controlled way.
Yes.
Not to understand the wisdom that they could have passed down, because no one passed anything down.
Well, I don't think that they knew that that was their role, or they even knew how to. I mean, I was pretty lucky to have a grandmother that kind of brought me up, where she was very wise and I still quote so much from what she'd ever brought me up to say. But I think also, you know, for you and I both separately, we don't have that support system around us. So it is really important that we step into sharing as much, or, you know, bringing the uncomfortable into the room so that your children can feel what that's like and know that it's okay to feel uncomfortable and know that it's going to pass. And I love that.
I think that is the job as a mother.
Yeah, completely.
When we can really be honest and know in the whole, and show our kids we're not perfect.
Yes.
And that we're still learning and we're still evolving and moving through things, and to be honest and sharing and say, look, I'm having a really crazy day today. I said, I'm feeling really sensitive. I'm overwhelmed. And I'm really cranky at nothing, and I could slam someone's face into a shed door for no reason at all. That's just the feeling that's inside of me. That's the only way I can explain it. So don't take anything personally. And, you know, if you can just support me in having a shower, and letting them know. So I don't just react out of the blue at nothing. But also for them to have an awareness of like, this is what women are going to go through. And I've said to them, like, you'll have a partner one day that will have periods, and they'll have these cycles in their life, and for you to tune into that and have awareness, especially to Zane. Tyler's a lot more in tune with me, but we kind of feed off each other in that. There's definitely a very sync, whereas Zane, it's a teaching.
Yeah.
And I said, baby, read the room sometimes. You're very sensitive and you're very aware. But when I'm feeling a certain way, and I know that you do this out of wanting connection to me by being funny or poking or just being stupid, I said, but sometimes when I'm feeling really sensitive and you start to come and box me, it just makes me feel like you're hurting me. I just need softness sometimes. So just read where I'm at sometimes. I want to teach him how to do that.
I think that's so important. I only said this on a podcast the other day. Women with children have got a really big role. Because, you know, when I'm sitting in front of a couple getting ready to have a baby, usually the man will say, I'm just here because I want my wife to not feel pain. Oh, I'm just here for my wife.
Good luck with that.
Well, I hate to say this to you, but you're
gonna embrace the pain.
Missed a lot of life, because no one's ever taught you that you are here. Your energy is really important, and it's real, and whatever you bring to the table is really important. And I'm watching it now, even with Anthony, you know, and he's come from a beautiful family, but he has no idea how to navigate this, because he was never brought up to understand periods and cycles and mood swings.
But I mean, we didn't either.
Well, no, that's very true.
So I mean, how are these guys going to know when we didn't know?
But at least the generation
Now
hopefully is starting to change,
100%.
that women are much more open about what their cycles are, much more open about talking about them.
Well, that's what I think I said in one of my early, maybe even the podcast that's out at the moment, Danny. It's like, I'm like finishing my cycle and I'm only learning. I could have worked into that.
I know.
Instead of pushed through the thing like I was supposed to be a bloke.
Yes.
And for us as as couples and men and women to understand that we're not the same, but how do we work with each other through our cycles?
Yeah.
Just because a man has a 24-hour cycle doesn't mean a woman has to feel the same way, because we're not going to feel the same way in each season of our cycle. But for a man to deeply in tune with that, to where his role is in supporting, as well as us to be really clear in communicating and not projecting. There's a real deepening in relationship, I think, when we can understand each other on that level.
Completely.
But also, too, for a man to be able to soften into those parts of us when we do need that, because they get to soften and know when we are in that probably ovulation, that stronger part, we've got space to hold then.
Yeah.
You know, we can lean on each other on those times. We don't always have to be on. And there's a holding both sides into that. And that's what I want to teach my boys, in the sense of like
that.
being aware of those subtle shifts and how can you approach them and not doing it all one way. Because as a bloke, it's all one way or it's uncomfortable. And I've never hidden my feelings. I've never, like, I mean, we've got one bathroom at the moment, so it's like one's on the toilet, one's in the shower. I'm doing an enema on the floor, so whatever, you know. It's like it's like the boys are just so used to weird shit.
Yeah, same in our
Periods,
house.
all of it. They're like, oh, like, so they've seen it all. Everything's not been really hidden, and I want them to see it all, because I don't want them to walk. And I said to them, one day you're going to have a relationship, and I hope that as now you're starting to support me more in what I'm doing, that you'll recognize that you can't just sit there and wait for me to do it, because I don't want you to sit there and wait for your wife to do it for you. I said, it's a together we do it.
Yeah.
I don't expect you to do anything more than your age or too much. I said, but the little versions of that, I said, I understand sometimes you're not going to be feeling good, but nor am I. And when you can pick up the slack in the little moments, for me, it means so much. Like Zane made his lunch this morning when I was getting ready, and the little things that I'm noticing pick up when I say this, it gives them the intuition and initiative to take on that role without being asked.
Oh, I love that. You're doing great work with boys.
But it's so cool, even though menopause and teenage hormones are very interesting together. I do think there's such a wisdom in what we can share. Whether it's mother, child, menopause and child, we're still mothering.
All the time.
So how do we mother in through the chaos? Because mothering is chaotic, birth is chaotic, life is chaotic in many moments. Yeah. It comes back to that deep understanding of yourself, doesn't it?
It really does. It 1000% does. And these beautiful babies that are being born now into a world that's faster than ever before.
Yeah. But I think they're ready for it.
They are ready for it.
But you would notice being around babies.
But the mothers need to be ready for the babies.
Yes.
And that's the work that I'm doing, is getting these mothers ready for these babies that are here for a different energy, different...
Oh, babe, that is so powerful.
A different frequency. They're here to create a different
world.
Well, kind of fucked it up for them, really. So they've got a lot of work to do.
But I think it's never too late.
No, it's never too late. But they've got a lot more...
But if we can do our work, and if we can be as conscious as we can to even have the open conversations of what we have passed down in our unconsciousness, and also be the breaker of the cycle before us, at least then we have space to hold for. Yeah. And that's going to change.
Completely.
And I think that's the exciting part.
It's really exciting. And
it's actually really cool when you look at it like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty magnificent.
Yeah. It's going to be amazing the next 10 years to see what comes.
Yeah, and I love what you're stepping into, because I've always thought, you know, being on that path when I was sort of researching birthing by myself and what I wanted to do, and it was so different, and how but I had that idea when I was younger, like where I wanted to put my boys into school, noticing who I was.
Yes.
So I figured if it's going to come through me, it's going to be somewhat similar, and I'll adjust if it's not. But knowing how I felt in this world, they're going to have some similarities to that. So if I can give them something that I didn't have, and take responsibility for what I didn't like or what I've taken on through what I perceived life to be, and not hand it on to them, just go, it was too hard, sorry. And it's not going to be perfect, and there'll be things, but the conversation is always open for them to bring it to me.
Completely.
And I know you parent the same way.
Yes.
And then, you know, what you're going to be teaching mothers on this journey. But then also, too, what we're actually navigating now, menopause, you know, this is another conversation in menopause and parenting.
Yeah, it's like something and that's what that doctor brought up for me is
There's no gap in this
there
shit.
is no time for you to have adjusted to that postpartum. Come out of the depletion, you've gone straight from depletion straight into menopause.
Yeah.
You know, and there's been no space for your body to completely restore itself, and you're bang back in. And she said it's really hard to ask your body of this, to be now still mothering heavily. When really your children should have been gone from the nest,
And you've got time
and
to
you've
rest.
got the space to rest and relax. And now it's kind of like, wow, this is interesting. Puberty and perimenopause to menopause are very similar energy.
That's why, and I think it's funny. I actually had the same conversation. I've recognized it in both my boys, obviously different to girls, but I do recognize the energy. Puberty and perimenopause is very similar. It's a bit erratic. You're tired. You're a bit sort of like, I don't know how I'm going to feel each day to day. There's
Each
a real
moment.
acceptance for what is, you know what I mean? And you you're moving into a different version of yourself.
Yes.
And that's what I notice in the boys. They're moving into a different version of themselves, so I have to let go of them to be that. And in the same time, I'm letting go of a sort of mother version of myself, but still mothering. But and giving of myself as I'm giving to myself, giving of, and it's a very interesting balance that I think all mothers probably now that are birthing later
Absolutely.
are going to be navigating.
It's a whole new compass that we really haven't really, like you said, there's a lot more going to be in that space now.
And it
what does that
needs
look
to be. What does it look like? We don't know, because there hasn't really been a generation that have been this. I think the next even is going to be more, because probably like us, most people have waited and are having kids later in life. And I think that's going to be, now that there's, like us, there'll be more conversations. So it'll be much more the norm to be experiencing this. And how do we co-regulate through those two hormonal transitions of our kids and parenting in these hormonal stages? What the fuck are we doing to ourselves? But it's beautiful, and I really there's so much more we could talk about. But I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think that conversation, maybe as we keep deepening on this journey, we'll come back and you know, have more wisdom to report on that, because it definitely is a journey. But, you know, I think whether it's, you know, coming into motherhood, parenthood in general, man, woman, to birthing, and I think that's a man, woman thing too, then, you know, the after journey of parenting, and then also working together through this stage in a relationship, perimenopausal, hormonal, together as a couple. Like, that's a lot of the time when a lot of the, you know, we lose sync with each other.
Well, and so the statistics saying that women that are into this stage of life, either they can go through really deep depression. They can feel like they've gone a bit crazy, that something really fundamentally is wrong with them. And they can also then, you know, separate themselves from their partners because they don't know that partner anymore. There's not, you're transitioning and you're not growing together again. And what I'm noticing as well, not just in my own relationship but in others, is that the husband or the partner can't understand why they have to hold the space for this part. You know, well, there's no child. There's no outcome for them other than just sort it out.
But it is an outcome, because the outcome will be a deeper connected relationship
That's
to
right.
each other.
It is.
So how devoted are you to the relationship?
That's right. So that's
as well as
coming
what's
up.
bringing up in you separately.
That's right. And then so what we're noticing is, and I've been doing so much research on this, is that if you get abandoned in your relationship and then your friends don't understand where you are either, and you're not talking, the suicide rate now is rising up with midlife.
Scary.
And that's really hard. As it is in postpartum.
Yeah.
It's rising. It's 1 in 5 now.
Wow.
Yeah. What in Australia? 1 in 5.
Whew.
So we have to, and 1 in 10 for men in postpartum.
And I can totally understand that.
I totally get it.
It's a very challenging journey.
Yeah.
And I think the more we can embrace the inner work of our own selves to have a deeper understanding, we're going to navigate with a different relationship to all of this.
Yeah, completely.
And it really has to be that commitment before all this to ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is not just a tick off the to-do list. It's going to be a constant way of being and adjustment as you are moving through the different stages and not attaching to one part of it, but allowing it to keep moving and let that be okay, because you're never going to be able to birth the new version of yourself or your children's selves if you're trying to keep it one way.
I love that.
Me too.
Oh, there's so much to talk into this
I
space.
know. Love it. Thank you so much, my darling. It was such an honour. I reckon we could talk for hours.
Oh, like days.
For days. We do need to catch up. So I want to thank Nicola Laye. I'll have all her details for any mothers that or breathwork, you know, both of it.
Yes.
Like the together, birthing. There is so much in that.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you, because it's definitely something that is going to empower so many mothers, but also the children that are coming through.
Oh, that's what I'm here for, the children.
It's just next level. So I honour you for doing this work.
Oh, thank you.
And I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you.